Hello and welcome back to the blog API. Today I wanted to go over a couple of the things that I've been doing just a little bit behind the scenes to try to get this behavior that I want. And I found some really cool libraries, and I found some really cool things that have really helped me in getting this out. So need to start the server, which is in nitrous, which is in the other window, nitrous, and we can merge these two things. There we go. Okay, so I need to start the server, Rails S, USB, all zeros. And we'll come back over here and we'll refresh till we see it. But basically the plugin that I found is actually over here. Oh, it looks like I closed that tab too, so it's called iframe resizer. And without getting into all the specifics, this tool is built specifically for when you're dealing with cross domain iframe stuff and trying to set the height and the width to the correct size for the iframe. Apparently works with multiple and nested frameworks, automatic domain authentication for cross-domain iframes, just a lot of really cool stuff. So the technology that it uses to do it is through the mutation observer and the post message. And there's a piece that you have to put in your server code as well as a piece that you have to put in your client code. And so the two of them can talk to each other. And that's kind of how that works. And then there was some other stuff that I'll get into. So let me just show you the implementation for it. So step one was adding it to the project here. So I used, it's available through Bower, and anything that's available through Bower for Rails, or through Bower and you want to use with Rails, I highly recommend using, I believe it's Rails Assets. Yes. And this is an amazing little framework here, and it's just it's in a web endpoint. You don't have to install anything for it to work. Actually, you just kind of request things from it, and it gives you exactly what you want. So you start off by just adding this source, and then you name things with the convention of Rails-assets- whatever that package name is. So this one was available, and it was called iframe resizer. So I put Rails-assets-iframe-resizer, and it just worked. And then what you do is you can use the normal asset pipeline and just require whatever. And since mine was only JavaScript, I didn't have to do any stuff in the CSS, and it just started working. It finds anything that's listed in the main of its bower.json file and adds it directly. Yeah, all assets exposed as main in bower.json will be automatically included. So this is a fantastic way to really simply and really quickly get any sort of front-end asset from Bower inside of a Rails application and have it work natively with the way that Rails just kind of works. You're no longer you trying to install some gem that is a wrapper around it and does this or that. Basically, they do that, but they do it on the fly, so you always get the most up to date, and you get exactly what is in Bower, not a couple versions behind, and you're waiting on the developer to kind of up the version of it. So I highly recommend moving away from that kind of process and moving into this Rails assets. It's a amazing way to just get really simple front-end assets from Bower and put them into a Rails application. So, and it works with Sinatra too, and maybe potentially something else. So, amazing little tool. Highly recommend that. So, if we go into the, let's look at the gem file, see how I did that. And basically, I did exactly that. I put the source, and then I put Rails assets -iframe -resizer, and that's exactly the same as running Bower install iframe resizer. it's, it works exactly the same. So anything that's available through Bower, you can install in this way, and it's really simple. It pulls it in the normal way. Then you go into your application.css, which I actually don't need in this one, but application.js, and you do the require iframe resizer, and that's it. That is all the work you need. From that point on, those files will be served with every page that you have. So amazing little tool. I didn't have to do anything, no dragging, dropping, no copying files, no placing things in arbitrary directories, no reading docs and running build commands or anything like that. It was just add this, and it just did it. It was great. So I do highly recommend that for anybody that's looking for Bower type stuff in Rails applications. All right, moving on. I added a comments controller because we are going to be dealing. I'm going to start working my way into dealing with the comments. I did. So I created a comments model, and I set the model to have a user. So the comment belongs to a user, and a user has many comments. And then I also set a post ID on the comment to tell it which post that comment was supposed to belong to. I then I fought with some of these security things, right? And I found that this was the best way to handle this one, which is just make it set to nothing. And this one I found doing a little bit of documentation reading on this kind of stuff, using the security, what do they call it, CSP, content security policy. There's a lot of things, a lot of little directives that you can put on here, but the one I was really after was frame ancestors. Now, a quick note about this, the frame ancestors is only supported in Chrome and Firefox, and we're not sure about the rest at the moment. So, it's sadly, we might be missing some support by doing this, but that's why, but when I looked at the other attribute for doing this, or the other header for doing this, it didn't really have a whole lot of support either. In fact, it was only Firefox that it was supported in. So this at least gives me another browser. And maybe it's that the other ones just don't have that security policy, or they don't have this override. So it could be a problem, but it gets me a little closer. All right, what it looks like now. So basically, as you notice, the size of the nitrous box that you saw there, that was the size of the iframe natively. And since I have that piece of code now serving through Rails in the assets pipeline, and then on this side I also have something which I'll show you in a minute, it now resizes it to fit its content, which is really nice, and it's really simple. So now basically it looks like it's part of the page, and that's the behavior I wanted. That's strange. Okay, I want it to look like it's part of the page, because that's that's kind of the trick that we're doing here. Even though technically it's coming from a whole nother server, in order to get around that OAuth stuff. I really don't want to move to OAuth from the client side. It's not secure. It can be done. There's lots of tutorials on how to do it, but unless somebody can provide me with a good argument of how it's safe to expose your keys and your secrets and stuff like that inside the client-side code and still have it be safe, then I'm probably going to continue proxying it through the application, or sorry, through the server. All right, so now that we have that, I need to show you the code that goes in there for that, and then we're going to get to what we were actually going to do today. So, where is that? Default? No, header, index. Okay. So basically the way this works is we place our iframe on the page, and this is no different than what we had before. And then I did give it an ID, and the little chunk that we needed was this iframe resize. You had to pass in a configuration object, which I'm using all the defaults, so just an empty object, and then you pass in sign in. Or sorry, the CSS selector for your iframe. So that's it. After that, it picks up, it does everything for you. It's a fantastic little library. To show, I think it's in head here. All that needed to be done was just adding in the Bower, basically adding, I pulled this down with Bower on this side and then added that into here. Now, the one thing I had to do was use this prepend site base URL in order to correctly set the size of this, because it generates a static page for each piece of your site instead of using a layout. That means that this is always going to be dependent on where you are inside of your folder structure. So when you're working with Jekyll, you need to do some of these tricks sometimes in order for it to generate the right URLs. So I just followed their example that they had up here with their CSS. Then they just prepend the base URL and it just works. So that was simple enough. You get a bunch of syntax errors. It looks really strange here. You're like, oh, well, you're opening the string and then closing the string, and then you've got this arbitrary text in here. Well, the thing to remember is that when dealing with Jekyll, this stuff runs ahead of time. So it's going to look for anything in between these two curly braces, and it's going to resolve it. And so it's going to take this as a string argument and then this as a filter or whatever. And then it's going to drop in the actual URL, in which case when you actually run it, you have this quote here and this quote here and the URL in between, which is exactly what we want. So it makes it look like this, essentially. It can be a little confusing when working with some of these auto generation frameworks and stuff like that. Just follow their lead and try it out. And if it breaks, then you know it doesn't work. If it doesn't break, then okay. So next step is okay. So the next step was I went to the comments, well, to each post, and I added a new iframe called comments. And then I added a comments, some really dumb markup in the Rails application. And so I noticed that every time I do this, I'm going to need an iframe and a script tag. So what's a tool that I can use that I can basically do all of this and maybe not have to write this whole thing out every time? And what I was thinking was Angular directive. I've already got Angular in here. I could just throw in a really nice Angular directive. I could call it like blog iframe or something, right? Anything I want, and then just pass in useful information. Whether it's the these are all default: width 100%, scrolling no, frame border 0. Those are all always going to be on my use case. So making this attribute or this directive just for my use case, so I can just add those in. So really all I need is the source, and I'd like to see if there was some way I could possibly auto-generate the ID so that I don't even have to deal with that. So really it's just blog iframe source, and it just automatically links everything up and does the iframe resize for me in the background. So that could be a really nice way to not have to duplicate your code all the time. So that's, I guess, what I was trying to look at today. So let me also just show you what I have for the comments. I mapped it to the index action, and what I'm doing is just basically showing the user nickname and the text for each comment. So that's just for now. This isn't, again, there's no comments actually in the database, so we can't really check on it at the moment, but I will. And then each comment is also filtered for each blog or post. So, the comments that are under this one are going to be different than the comments under this one, which we would expect, but Yeah, that's handled in the controller here, where the post ID equals the post ID. So simple enough. And then I guess just for thoroughness and completeness, here's the routes file where I added comments and /post ID. So that's everything that's changed so far. And I guess now we're going to start moving on into Angular, creating a directive. And it's been a while since I've created a directive, so we're going to do a little bit of research. There we go. And AngularJS. And we want to go to learn, develop, API reference, and directive. Directives. Creating custom directives. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. I just need like that little push of, oh, remember this is what you have to do. Dot directive, blah, template, okay. So let's start with that. Let's just start with the basics and we'll just keep moving up. So I'm going to create my directive. I'm terrible practice, but I'm just going to do it right in here inside the same file. Directive, and now's the time to name it. So I guess we'll call it, sure, blog iframe. Okay, and we give it a function, right? Nope. Yes. And we return in our template. So then we say return and template, and what do we say that we really needed? We just needed our iframe. With some sort of ID and some sort of source and a width of 100, scrolling, and frame border 0. Okay, simple enough, right? So we close that. So another iframe, and then we'll just go ahead and throw the script right on there. So script, and we'll throw in this iframe resize. And for good measure, we'll put the type on here too. It's always good to include the type. Even though a lot of the assumed ones are correct, explicitly setting it puts you in better practices as well. Alright, so we need to determine what that ID is going to be, and that stuff's going to be passed in. So we'll change these to double quotes so we're not hitting issues with that. And there we go. And that's the basics of creating a directive, actually. Now we need to actually take in parameters. So how do we do that? I believe it's on the link function. We also want to restrict it. We only want it to match an element. So we'll restrict E. So we'll add that on. Restrict E. And then scope. Yeah, I don't think so. Wait. The first my customer element binds the info attribute to Naomi. Example? Okay, so that is what we want. So what was the code for it? Okay. And I think we'll see if this works. What I'm going to try to do is we're going to do var Well, I don't know if it caches it or... You know what we can do? We'll just pass in the ID as well, right? So on that example, we wanted scope and then set something equal to something else. So scope, and we want ID equals ID, and source equals source. Really simple mappings. Okay, it manipulates the DOM. Not quite. Okay. No, I don't need one that wraps other elements. So, yeah, so then at that point, all I need to do is use the pieces themselves. So, really simple, right? Customer info.name, customer info.address. I guess Naomi is a full object. And we don't need that. Is equals the right sign then? Well, here's one thing they're doing. Attribute type. No, so I can just use the equal sign here. Okay. We're gonna give it a shot. So it looks like I don't need the source or the ID there. We're just gonna do that. Okay. So now all we would need to do to test this out is to try and replace this with our version. So we say blog iframe, give it an ID of, I guess we'll try sign in, and a source of this source. And then we can close that off. I do need to do a couple things in here. One being I need to pass in the ID, and I need to pass in the source, as well as at the end of this pass in the ID here. Okay, so that should be simple enough. So now the next thing we need to do is we've replaced this here, we need to comment this line out, and then we need to comment out our script stuff. Okay, and then if we refresh the page, we get a bad request. Okay. Bad URI. It's really strange. So what to do in this situation? Well, one is I don't know if the equal sign is what we want, actually. Let's try that. I have no idea, but I know I've seen that somewhere. And regenerate them, I guess, and we're still getting bad requests. Okay, well that's not helpful. Let's see, what does Angular say? So what does that do? Use @attribute in the scope option when you want your directive to expose an API for binding behaviors. No, not really. I just want to grab the value of it. I don't need anything really fancy. I'm doing like the really simple. What does the @ do? Title. Hello world. Maybe it's the @ that I need. Okay, let's try that. Well, we got a different result. We got so the error says can't interpolate that. Why? This error occurs when interpolation fails due to some exception. The error message above should provide an additional context. It's not. Insecure processing a resource from an untrusted source. From URL not allowed by ST delegate policy. Strict contextual escaping mode, enabled by default as blocked resource. Typically this would occur if you're attempting to load an Angular template from an untrusted source. It's also possible that a custom directive threw this error for a similar reason. By default, only URLs that belong to the same origin are trusted, while these URLs with the same domain protocol port and application of the document. Okay, that's fine. Trust. Alright, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to trust as a resource URL. So what was it? $SCE. I guess we need to pass that in. So we will $SCE and $SCE. And then we can $SCE trust as resource URL and save the file. Now when we refresh the page, I get an unexpected token. Oh, that's right. I'm not using those anymore. That's right. I flipped. Aha. I remember. I had to flip Angular to use these instead. So that's what Jekyll uses. Okay. And one more, I believe, in here. I think I need to move this to ng source. And now we'll give that a shot. Unexpected token. Oh, that's right. I need the square bracket down here. Okay. Now I'll refresh. Not found. Straight contextual escaping disallows interpolations that concatenate multiple expressions when a trusted value is required. Okay. Oh, not that page, this page. See, it seems to be passing it directly in instead of... just trying a bunch of different things here. Well, I didn't get an error about it, but I got, like, nothing. So it appears to not be... Also, this down here isn't getting replaced. Alright, so still a bunch of things going on. I'm going to fine-tune this to exactly what I need it to do. And... Let's see what does it actually generate. So site index. It generates well, we can't see that there really. It still looks correct actually. Okay, so if I can just pass ID into here. See if that makes it a little better. Possibly. Yeah, it doesn't actually, not until it hits the DOM does it actually get injected in. Okay, so yeah, that's, of course that's not found because it hasn't evaluated it. Oh, why not? So that's kind of frustrating because it's supposed to okay. Suppose for let's just move it to source and see if we can run it with this. No idea. Give it a shot, right? What did it generate? It generated an iframe with no source. Okay, so it's definitely ng source, and we'll try reducing it back down to this, see what happens. Probably says, yep, untrusted source. Either whitelist. How do we whitelist the URL? SE delegate provider resource URL whitelist. Okay, so we'll try that. Flip over, and in our config, we need the what was it? $SCE resource SOURCE provider, I believe. SE delegate provider. Yep. Delegate provider. Alright, copy that. Come over here. Now we've pulled that in. So now we can say provider dot resource URL whitelist. And then I guess we pass in an array of whitelisted URLs, which in our case is the one of them would be this URL, as well as the other URL. Which is edit this URL. Okay, so we save that, and we will give it another shot. Refresh. But I whitelisted it. Restrict weather. Okay, well, I did the whitelist. When provided replaces the URL, resource URL whitelist with the value provided. This array must be an array or null. A snapshot of this array is used so further changes to the array are ignored. Follow this link for a description of the items allowed in the array. Self, string, except the special value self. String is matched against the full normalized absolute URL of the resource being tested. Okay. Okay, so I guess now I need self in here as well. Okay. Can I do this? Will this work? Well, I mean, it does have the URL here. Grr. Yay! Alright. We finally did it. Okay. Except our script isn't running to set that the height of the container. Try to figure out why, and my suspicion is that it's not it's not setting the right thing in here. Where I was hoping it would, but I don't see it doing that. Because I want it to replace that in there. Nope, doesn't want to do it. What does it look like in the DOM? Oh, no. I have been noticing this. This has made me a little weary about using what I'm using. I have noticed that occasionally the page will just crash like that. That's not good at all. And not what I want, obviously. Yeah, it's still passing it in as a straight ID. Oh, maybe I need scope.id? Server's not running on the port. What happened to the server? Connection lost, reconnecting. Strange. Alright, so we go back to workspace, log backend, run our command. And back to the page, start refreshing. And, well, what happened here? We do have scope.id. I guess that's undefined. So we're close. We're close. We're getting, almost a really nice way to, just create really simple ways for this to work, but having trouble getting it past to the JavaScript piece of this. Which in all fairness, I guess doesn't have to actually be on the page, but could run separately inside of a controller or resolve method, or maybe there's an after on directives, so that I can run something after the directive has finished loading onto the page. Here, link. Our link function, what is link? Creating a directive that manipulates DOM. Directives that want to modify the DOM typically use the link option. Link takes a function with following signature. Scope is the Ingo scope object. Element is the jQuery light. Okay. Attributes is a hash object with key value pairs normalized attribute names and their corresponding attribute values. Our link function, we want to update the displayed time once per second. That sounds about right. So let's try moving that into the link code. So put a comma here, and then we type link, and it's a function that takes scope, element, and attributes. And then we pass it, basically we can remove this script tag, and we can move this code down, which makes our template even smaller, which is great. So we can try scope.id, or worst case, we could do attributes .id, I suppose. But let's give it a shot, right? Yep, it crashed again. Very strange. Need to figure out why that is. Doesn't quite appear to be working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work in a console log and see what it's actually looking at. Console log scope.id, and then just for the heck of it, console log attributes ID, and we'll see if which one has the right value. So refresh, and both have sign in and sign in, except that it needs the pound sign. And that might have been our problem all along. Expected iframe tag found blog iframe. Oh, yeah. That's a good point. So we're passing in blog iframe, right? And that has an ID, and then we're passing the same ID as something else. That's not a good way. So what we need to do is we will change the directive to, instead of take the ID, we will have it take an identifier. So at identifier, right? How do I spell that? Spelling, no? Is it just IER? Yeah, IER, okay. So now the identifier becomes the ID, so now we need to change it in our index HTML from ID to identifier. Cool. Now we refresh and scope.id, and then we did attributes.id. So that looks correct. And then we're adding the pound sign on the front of it and calling it, but I wonder if maybe this doesn't exist at the time. So I'm wondering about timing. How quickly does this run before it gets spat out onto the page, or is it after? It's a interesting scenario. So I need to find the event. Wait, what was the thing about the timeout? In our link function, we want to update the displayed time once a second or whenever the user changes time frame. In lines 2, we will use interval service to call handle on a regular basis. This is easier than timeout, but also works better in end testing. We want to make sure that all timeouts are completed before ending the test. So we also want to remove the interval if the directive deleted so we don't introduce a memory leak. Register an event. Directives should clean up after themselves. You can use element on destroy or scope.on destroy. Creating a directive that wraps other elements, no. But is there any other information down here that might be useful? Creating a directive that adds listeners. No. Creating directives that communicate. Okay. Alright, so we gotta find a way somehow well, probably a horrible, horrendous, and terrible way to do this would be to just do, we'll set timeout and function, run that code, let's try 10 milliseconds after and see if anything happens. And it's crashed again. Really need to find out why. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Slight delay. Let's see, how low can we get this? Let's go with 8. Okay. Can we go to 1? Yes, apparently we can. Okay, so really we just needed to wait just a tiny bit in order to really get it to exist on the page beforehand. Alright, so another thing that we could do is we could find out what the height of this really is and then have it do that ahead of time. Make sure this part still works. Yep. And that way it doesn't, like, the post starts down here and then jumps up to the top. So that's basically one of the ways to add in the Angular, or creating a directive in Angular that you can use to wrap around some of your logic that you have, and help remove some of the stuff out of your DOM and make it look a lot simpler. So we can now delete this, and we can now delete this really long line and replace it with this much simpler line right here that has all the functionality we need inside of it and goes ahead and takes care of itself. So really good techniques. Don't use these too much. Don't directivize your entire site, because it's usually not worth it. But do, when you find pieces that you're repeating frequently, which this one I'd already done twice and I knew I was going to do more, It's sometimes it's nice to put them into a nice little directive so that they just spit out on the page correctly, and it's great. So, um, yeah, that's creating custom directives in Angular. And I will see you guys next time.